So what we're going to talk about in this video is jump starting a car, a pickup, a tractor, a truck, a piece of heavy equipment, whether it would be 12 volt or 24 volt, and how the batteries lay out and how to go about it in a safe and orderly manner. I want to tell you two quick stories. The first story was about my uncle who had an old Ford grain truck, and the battery was in the passenger side floorboard, and he went to put the jumper cables on it, and the battery blew the top out. The battery blew up right in his face. He was very fortunate that it didn't do any kind of damage. The second one I'm going to tell you about was what happened to me. I had an old scraper one time, an old International scraper. Had a lowboy truck sitting there waiting to get it, and I was trying to get it started and I couldn't get it to start. I had two sets of jumper cables on it. The battery sat right next to the seat. Had a pair of them in there. 12 volt system right next to the seat. I pulled the compression release out and I reached up to push the start button, and that battery blew up, hit me in the elbow, went flying up in the air and came down, and part of it landed on the lowboy driver, and it just was a bad deal. Blew acid all over everybody and everything that was around there. Not a good scenario. Always remember, if something like that ever does happen, get as much water as you can, as quick as you can, get it in your eyes, get it rinsed off of you. Battery acid's corrosive. Hopefully that never happens to you. But just a couple quick stories to show you what can happen. Other thing I like to do is, it's always a good idea to wear a pair of safety glasses. And I like these old cheap cloth throwaway gloves. Anytime you're dealing with a battery and battery acid, that cheap pair of gloves is going to save you a lot of clothes, coveralls, whatever you're wearing. When you're done, take them gloves and throw them in the trash. For what they cost, it keeps it off your skin, it keeps it off of you, keeps it off your clothes. World of difference. So this particular set of jumper cables here, I've had these quite a while. You can see how good and heavy these ends are. They've got a strong spring. You can see how thick this wire is. It's a pretty good set of cables, plus the fact they're 20 feet long. You get a pair of jumper cables that's 8 feet long or 9 feet long or 10 feet long. Sometimes you got to try to get really close, but with them being 20 feet long, it really makes it handy. But you don't want to buy a cheap set. Buy a good set that's got good heavy cable and good heavy clamps. Makes the world of difference when you're trying to get something done. I'm going to lay them on the ground with the pickup truck that we're going to jump with. We're going to keep them separated. We're going to leave them laying there on the ground. We're going to take our positive and our negative ends, and we're going to hook them up. Positive on positive, negative on negative. Make sure that the negative is only touching the battery. It's not touching the frame of anything. And the same with the positive, that the positive's on the positive post and it's not touching anything. Once you get those hooked up, come down here, we're going to get these two ends off the ground here. And what I like to do is I like to hook the positive on first and never stand over the top of this battery when you hook the negative on. Put your negative on there just like that. Go in and start your truck. So that's 12 volt battery. And what you're jumping here is a 12 volt battery. Positive on positive, negative on negative. Never stand over the top of that battery. So this system right here is exactly what we have in my pickup truck over there. It's a parallel circuit. It's the same voltage, but it's double the amperage because we're using two batteries. Everybody gets confused about two batteries. Well, you got a 12 volt battery and a 12 volt battery, negative to negative, positive to positive. It's still 12 volts. So that's a parallel circuit, just like what you saw in this pickup truck right here. The voltage stays at 12 volts. These are 1,000 amp batteries, so the amperage doubled. The amperage doubled to 2,000. So it's a 12 volt system with 2,000 amps. The next one that I'm going to show you here is a series circuit. It uses two 12 volt batteries, but they're hooked in series. It's a series circuit. The voltage is doubled, but the amperage stays the same. So a 12 volt system, 12 volt system. This is what you're going to find a lot on a piece of heavy equipment. Caterpillar, Komatsu, anything like that. It's going to have series circuit, simple series circuit. Negative to positive, positive to negative. Positive goes to the starter, 24 volts. Now while we're here, let's just go and show you real simple here. If we were jumping this piece of equipment with a 24 volt system, and you're looking at this thing thinking, oh man, where do I put my jumper cables? Always remember that if you hook your jumper cables to one battery at a time, so if you hook your negative here and your positive here, you have 12 volts. You can jump that off your pickup truck. If you put your negative here and your positive here, that's 12 volts. You can jump that off your pickup truck. If you put your positive on here and you go to ground, you just fried your pickup truck because you just put 24 volts to the alternator and you probably burned your alternator up. Always remember, positive on positive, negative on negative, one battery at a time. I try not to use the chassis ground because if you don't know which one of these goes to chassis ground, then you could be sitting there at 24 volts. You always got to pay attention to that. But any type of a piece of heavy equipment, jump one battery at a time. So if this was in a crawler tractor and you couldn't get it to start in the morning, and you put your jumper cables on this battery, put it on there and let it on there for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then take your cables off, both of them, at the same time, and put them on this battery and jump this battery for 10 minutes or so. You'll get that old girl to start for you. One battery at a time. This next one I put in here because the first time I saw this, I was trying to think who designed this. It's a Caterpillar D8T. They run 4 batteries, and it's really kind of goofy how they wired it until you study it. And then once you study it for a little bit, you figure out that they got 2 parallel circuits and 2 series circuits. And it does a fine job. So voltage comes in here negative to negative, right? So these 2 batteries here are in parallel. Same way with this one, positive to positive. These 2 batteries are in parallel. But then they go from negative to positive and negative to positive, so they got 2 that are hooked in series along with 2 that are in parallel. So they doubled their voltage and they doubled their amperage. So now let's say that you had to go jump start this thing, and you look in here and you see all these cables and you're thinking, what in the world's going on? Alright, here's how it works. Battery to battery. If you go positive and negative, you got 12 volts. The next battery, if you ran your jumper cables in here and you put it on positive and negative, it's 12 volts. The same way with the other 2, positive and negative, 12 volts. So as long as you're only jumping one battery at a time and not using the chassis ground, you'll always be fine. But always remember that, make sure that you can see that there's a plus or a minus when you hook your cables up. A lot of times you get in there and you clean that dirt off of these things, you're trying to figure out what's what. A lot of times like this one here, they've got a red on a DAT. This is red. This whole cable's red. Red and red, red and red. You can't tell that that's black unless you've seen the negative sign on the battery. So you got to be very careful. Make sure that you're putting the negative on the negative and the positive on the positive. So if you look here, we've got two new ends. And if you look real close right here, you'll see where that one says negative and that one says positive. And I'm going to show you the difference in them. The negative is always a little bit smaller than the positive. So when you go to put the cable end on, you see that negative, it fits real nice. You go to put the positive end on, you see how much play there is in there? The positive post is always a little bit bigger than the negative post. Always remember that. The other thing I like to do is if you got a cable that's got stud batteries, so you got a stud battery and a stud battery, and then this usually leads someplace else or whatever, you can take the stud batteries and screw this post down on the stud battery and screw it down and snug it up real good. And when you get that thing snugged up real good, a good place to put your jumper cables on. Same way with the negative. You can buy these ends at just about anywhere. They're not expensive. They come in a set of two. You get a positive and a negative for probably $5 or $6, something like that. On this particular Bobcat, this is an E80 mini excavator. I shouldn't call it mini, it's an E80 excavator. The positive, there's a piece of sheet metal that comes right along here and it's real close to the positive terminal. And there's hardly any way to get that down in there to get around that piece of sheet metal. So what I like to do is I stick a rag around the sheet metal and then I go down and around and get a hold of my positive terminal so that can't short out between my positive terminal and my sheet metal. So there's always a way that you can do something without getting yourself shorted out. So always be aware of the ground, you know, but the positive, that's the main one. Keep it to the point where it won't arc against something. So I hope we helped you out a little bit on that. Be safe. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up, and thanks for watching.